ready. Let's go.
You'll see the thing turn live on top. It's thinking right
Yeah.
now.
We're
There we
in.
go.
Woo.
Yes.
Woo.
Is it official?
It is.
Looks like
We're
we're
streaming
official.
live on Facebook, which we do once a month. Right. My
Nice.
name is Dan Tyre from HubSpot. Who are you, Todd?
You just said I'm Todd. I'm Todd Hockenberry, Top Line Results. And our special guest today is Chirs Moore from HubSpot. Thanks for coming, Chris.
My good
Yeah.
friend and
Thanks for having me.
colleague, Chirs Moore,
Oh,
who
Thank you.
amazing build up, a wealth of knowledge, and super excited for this event because it lives an inbound philosophy for years before we invented inbound, right?
That's right.
And super excited to hear his story, right? If you're interested in becoming an inbound organization over the next few years, right, this is definitely worth 45 minutes of your time.
Excellent.
Awesome.
And yeah, we gotta ask you though, Chris. I get the HubSpot sticker, okay, and I know you're in Tennessee. What's up with the Longhorn stuff?
Yeah, you like the consistent branding. I'll give everybody the full shot there. But yeah, I'm from Texas. I'm from Houston, lived in Austin a little bit as well, and just was always a Longhorn fan. Like had some family that went there. I thought that's where I was going to go to school. Soccer took me somewhere else. I actually went to Sam Houston State in Texas. Everybody thinks I went to Texas, but I actually went to Sam Houston State because that's where I played soccer. But always been a huge fan, and you know, I like to represent, keep the branding consistent. I'll tell you one last thing. I did have them change the orange in this Longhorn here, so all of my fellow UT fans always rag me on that, but I had to keep it, you know, consistent for HubSpot.
Nice,
You know,
nice, well
that
done.
feeds me.
Well done.
Yeah.
So Dan, you've got something. You're doing some new stuff. Why don't you just tell everybody what you're doing now these days?
Yeah, so as a 14-year HubSpot employee, right, working hard to take our solutions partner program and our group study and migrate it over to broader like process, right? I want to reach more folks as the inbound revolution expands. And I've been nominated as an inbound fellow. So super excited to continue my work at HubSpot, continue my work around inbound, continue my work around the inbound organization. And today we're going to talk about trends in inbound with both end user customers and the partner community. And that's why we asked Chris to join.
Excellent. Well, inbound fellow, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Is that a good title? Do you guys like that title?
I like that.
I want to be a fellow, or maybe a pal. I don't know, or something like that, or at least a dude.
You're a co-author. That's even better. Come on.
That's right. That's right. Here it is for everybody.
On the ooh, I like that.
That's a good guess right there. That's right. Butter up the hosts. That's.
I'll tell you. Yeah, I was gonna say I made sure it was on the desk right before we started. I will say that at Dell, and I know we'll probably talk a little bit about that, but we had fellows at Dell. There were Dell fellows. So you're in good company. You know, Dell's kind of a small company you may have heard of, right?
Yeah.
So they built a good business and they had fellows. So I think you're in good company.
Awesome.
All right. Well, Chris, that's enough about us and our nonsense. Let's talk about you. So, Chris, talk about who are you, where you're from, other than liking Texas and going to Sam Houston and playing soccer. Let's talk about you and HubSpot.
Yeah. I'll do that. I'll first say that I'm a husband, a beautiful wife, been married 13 years. We have a 12-year-old son, two most important people in my life. It's the reason why I pop out of bed every day and come to this awesome job that I have. So I just wanted to call that out. I think one of the questions I read is like, am I a dog or a cat? Someone asked me that once. We actually have, you asked that.
Are you a dog person or a cat person?
Yeah. So it's funny. I'm actually a dog person, but we have a cat and I love that cat, except for when he like jumps up on my back in the morning because he wants some love, you know, and so he just jumps up on my back and just scratches all down my back. I'm not a cat person at that point. But for the most part, we have both animals. And then, so yeah, I went to school in Texas, right out of school. I thought I was going to play soccer the rest of my life. There was a different plan. I've had 16 knee surgeries from sports. And so I've had to kind of change directions. And so once I got hurt and realized that soccer wasn't it for me, I had to go get a real job. And I went and I worked at Enterprise Rent-A-Car because they're really good at coming to get people out of college, right? And so I worked there for about 4.5 years as a manager. Really loved it. I met a guy in Texas that I had just happened to live by named Nicholas Holland. He's actually our VP and GM of the marketing hub here. And so we met, became best friends. It's about 23 years ago. And he said, when we were in Texas, he said, hey, I'm going to move to Nashville and I'm going to start a business. At the time I was making like 65, 70 grand. I thought I was rich. I was like 22 years old. I was like, this is all the money I'm ever going to need. And he says to me, hey, I can't pay you any money, but I can give you about $500 and you can sleep on my couch. We're going to go start a business in Nashville. And I was like, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want to do. Give up all this money and wait tables at night and build this business with you. And so we built an agency here in Nashville. I picked up, left everything I knew, and moved to Nashville. And we did that for a few years. And then I decided to go help Dell build out their channel program. And so I spent some years with Dell. I was there for about 10 years, both on kind of the direct side and indirect side. And I had a heavy focus on the software side as well, and kind of got into some marketing and stuff like that. So did that for about 10 years. And then I've been with HubSpot for about 3 years. Best job I've ever had, best career I've ever had. Happy to be here. Enough about me, probably.
No, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. I love the background, right? Getting the partner piece, working in that world, getting to see them with lots of different clients. What were some of the kind of inbound things that you learned, like working as a partner and then going to Dell? Like we talk about this big idea of inbound. We talk about principles, right? So, how long have you been kind of adopting and using these principles?
Yeah, it's funny is like, because back then I didn't know about inbound. I didn't know, like, I of course come to HubSpot and I get taught about inbound and I'm like, oh, I've kind of been doing that already. But now it's a little bit more official. And so, to answer that question a little bit more specifically, like when we had the agency, it was actually a lot of outbound and some inbound. So 17 years ago when we started CenterSource, I wish we would have had HubSpot. Man, I would have made it so much easier. Or an inbound philosophy, if you will, right? Because it was a lot of like, just all we did was cold call and go to networking events and, pound the pavement and all that. And by the way, I believe that you still have to do that and do inbound. And in my own personal opinion, you can't just have leads rain out of the sky. But some of the things that we were doing, we were doing kind of like thought leadership, right? So that was, some of the stuff we got into webinars eventually. So it was a little bit more basic. We didn't have the tools per se for inbound, but we were doing some of the activities. And then when I went to Dell, we had some more obviously sophisticated tools that we could use. And so we dove into that quite a bit, right? So I got a little bit more experience with Dell, and it was a little bit more regimented, and there was automation and kind of everything played into it. But again, we still were doing a lot of like outbound, efforts. And so what I've realized is over the years is, I think sometimes, we get on calls or we talk with people and they want to just like focus in on inbound, and they forget that it's a whole strategy. You have to do inbound and outbound really to be kind of complete. But yeah, probably out 17 years.
So I want to dig into that a little bit. That's a question I get a lot, is about outbound tactics, kind of, or traditional interruptive tactics. You mentioned cold calls, paid ads would be another one. I deal with a lot of industrial and manufacturing companies, so they're in the kind of trade show space and a lot of like industry publications. So they're always getting solicited to run ads in a trade magazine. You said that you have to do both because from a lead gen perspective is kind of what I heard.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about the place for outbound tactics and how you would use inbound principles as you're doing those outbound tactics.
Yeah, I think, the reason why I say that is, when you have an inbound strategy in place and you're kind of using those methodologies, right? It's like, it's that nurture piece where I feel like outbound has to be introduced, because, if you're doing it right, let me give you an example. So we recently decided to get a pool, probably like everybody else. There it is. Yeah, there it is. We COVID hit, and we were all sitting around board, and we had played spades probably enough times. Can't even count how many times we played spades, which I love spades, by the way, and I'll challenge anybody to spades. But we were sitting there, and we kind of got tired of cards, and we said, you know what? My wife's like, we need a pool. And I'm like, oh gosh, this sounds expensive. And I didn't know anything about pools. I had some friends that had pools, so I asked them some questions, but I wanted to do my own research. So I got online and I started to learn about pools and what types of pools were there, and what, should I get concrete, or, should I get gunite? What if I'm only going to be in the house 8 years, right? And so I start to do all of this research, and I find this company that is putting out like some pretty good content, right? And it's Pool and Spa Depot here in Nashville. And so they're putting out all this content, and then I sign up for like a pool school type thing that they have. And then before I know it, I'm getting even more content. And then in between, someone reaches out and calls and says, hey, I just noticed that, you've been looking at some of our content over the last few weeks. Just wanted to see if you had any questions on the pool. And I'm like, I have 100 questions. And so they were like, and he was like, awesome. I want to help you answer those. And that's what I mean is like, there has to be an inbound philosophy, and you have to nurture and not just call. I mean, you could certainly cold call, and we need to do some of that, but it's like a mixture, right? It's like inbound.
Hold on a second.
Reached out.
Hold on.
Yeah,
no cold calling. No cold. You can warm call.
Yeah, warm call. Okay.
Right.
That's
Here's
fair.
the difference. Can I spend 2 minutes to explain the difference,
Please.
Todd?
We expect a rant from you about this time in the show.
Okay, I sat on my hands for 12 minutes, and now because Chris, you haven't cold called in 20 years, right?
That's true.
Whenever you pick up the phone, right? Number one, you check out my LinkedIn. All right. Number two, you know a little bit about who I am, a little bit about my company, a little bit about my industry. In fact, before you pick up the phone and call somebody, how much time do you research before you actually engage?
If it depends on the prospect, and there's some variables, but if it's someone I'm really trying to break into, I can spend upwards of an hour, 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay. What a cold call is, believe me, I've done a lot of cold calling in my day. You make 125 calls a day, right? You pick up the phone, you call everybody. It's smile and dial, right? You say the same stupid, dopey things to everybody.
And here's the new one, Dan. I'm sorry to interrupt. I hate car dealers, the way they market. Here's the newest car dealer one, and everybody gets this. Your car warranty is about to expire. That's the new one. Like they said it's just horrible. Yeah,
and it's automated. It's automated, so they don't even have to. The reason why is there's no one left in the United States who wants to call, right? Because first of all, you want to punch somebody. You turn all Hulk-like as soon as you get that call. Number two, it's not a joyous occupation, right? Picking up the phone and saying the same dopey thing all the time when you know you're pissing people off, very short shelf life, right? You can't do that for a long period of time. Number three, it's horrible. The actual metrics behind it, the conversion rate is a little over 1%. So you're taking off 99% of your prospects, right? You're wrecking your brand, and it's horrible. Chris, what you do is warm call. Number one, an hour's worth of research. Oh my goodness. You'll know my middle name. You'll know my dog's name. You'll know where I went to college. You'll know a lot of different things. Number two, you'll engage as a professional, which means 4 connections over 12 days, right? Number three, you'll always lead with, hey, Dan, what can I do to help? That's just, I don't know if it's Texas charm or Tennessee charm or Chirs Moore charm, right? But that's what you do, right? And then all of a sudden I'm like, ooh, this guy's done his homework. He knows I'm a public speaker. He knows I wrote a book. He knows. And then it's a completely different conversation. The final thing you do is you let me talk, which Todd doesn't let me talk a lot on these Facebook Live things. I'm only kidding. Right? You're an excellent active listener. So you'll ask some questions on that call, right? And then you'll let me answer. And we'll start to have a conversation. That is the essence of the inbound organization, right? Engaging. Yep. And what we've seen at HubSpot and all of our portfolio companies and in the companies that we consult with at the inbound organization, right? Sometimes people have the ideal, but don't necessarily translate that into the tactics, right? Todd, you work with that all the time, right? People are like, no, I get it. We're an inbound organization. And you're like, why are you cold calling all those people? Well, like, oh, that's just the way we do it. And there's this disconnect between the strategy and how people actually implement.
My favorite one is people will say, hey, let's do inbound. Let's buy a list. Like that's one of my favorite ones. Let's buy a list.
Todd kind of shakes his head and
we're not going to buy a list.
That's not the way it works.
Yeah. So, and again, there's a way to do calls. There's a way to do LinkedIn outreach. There's a way to reach out to people. I always feel like if I have a solution, I know my audience, I know my persona, and I know how to help them. I owe it to them to reach out to them. It's my job to reach out to them because I can help them. That's why I'm here. I want to help them. But I can do it in a way that's inbound and not a way that's annoying and interruptive and that makes me angry, right? I'm gonna share stuff. I'm gonna get content that's helpful. I'm not gonna pressure them. I'm not gonna ask for 15 minutes of their time in my first connection request. I'm not gonna do any of that stuff. I'm gonna be, hey, we help other people just like you, and here's how we do it. Hope this is something you can find valuable. So I think we need to let Chris talk some more. So let's.
Yeah, no, it's fine. No, this is all good. I was just gonna say the one thing I'd add to that is like, I think a lot of times what I see happen, and this is both on like the direct customer side and on the partner side, but I see, they do a good job. They, they decide that they're going to go all in on inbound, and they just, they decide that they're going to nurture people, and they're have all those touch points, and they're going to have the right persona identified and kind of do everything right on the front end. And then the lead comes in, and then they don't act. They don't have the team to reach out and act, right? And kind of take it to the next level. And so I don't know, sometimes it's a breakdown on the sales side, sometimes it's a breakdown on the process side, sometimes it's both. But the example that I gave is just kind of using myself, with the pool thing is we reached out to like a bunch of different fence companies. We did the same thing. We had to research fence companies and all of that. And it's crazy how many people didn't call us back. And I hear this also in the business world, right? And, in kind of like with larger companies, they're like, yeah, we reached out to this company and, we never heard back. And I think that's a breakdown oftentimes in the process that they have set up, right? So it's not just the inbound. Like, I think that's important that you talk about inbound and you practice inbound, but there has to be a solid process for that lead handoff for them to then call and then take it, because you still need that salesperson, right, to educate and take it to the end. And I don't know, I see that breakdown a lot in business.
You that's a really great point, right? You've got to have a good process internally to know what to do in the certain scenarios. There's another piece that goes along with that too, and I think it's resources. You hinted at that, right? That if there's not, like I have a client that's a fantastic client. They've done great with inbound, and we ran an experiment. We wanted to do chat, and I was convinced that live chat was going to be a huge winner for them, and so we turned it on. And it was something like they got 3 times more conversions than they would normally with like just contact us, right? Their contact us's went down slightly, but the number of interactions went through the roof. It was like, this is like, we hit a home run here, right? And they still had to turn it off because they didn't have the resources to follow up with all the, and I'm like begging them, like, you got to get an inside salesperson or somebody that'll manage this. This is a big company too, right? So I see that a lot where like there's this resource imbalance where it's very heavy sales oriented, like you said, right? Hey, we get the leads, we handle, we do our sales stuff. But I see a lot of times where there's under resources on the front end, and I think the mistake is companies undervalue those first touches. And we should have all learned this lesson by now, right? The internet, if you don't do it right the first time, you're gone, right? If you don't take care of me right off the bat, I got 10 other options. Right?
That's right.
So
it's the foundation. That's the foundation of the inbound organization, right? Understanding, Chris, more competition or less in 2021?
More.
How much more?
30% more. I don't know.
Okay, so much more that you have to change, right? Todd and I spent half of our life explaining to people that, like, you always have a choice. You're a business person. You've been successful, but we're in a period of transition, right? And there's so much more competition and an extraordinary amount of, according to HubSpot marketing statistics, 70% of people will leave, never tell you, right? That's in the book, right? Todd made me put all the statistics in the book. Right. And they're like, people just leave. They'll just ghost you, which apparently is a Tinder term of people who like when you're dating, right? If you don't want somebody, you'll just like disappear.
Wait a second.
sure.
We've been married forever. Not to each other, though. Some people, when they see us in the room together, they're like, you guys are like husband and wife, right?
I know. Yeah,
Right.
But what do you know about Tinder? What the heck are you talking about?
I picked it up in one of my public presentations, but the ghosting process, right,
Yep.
that relates to personal interactions also relates to a business function. And Todd, we spend all of our inbound organization time saying, okay, 3 steps. Number 1, you got to start with your mission, your MSpot, your mission, your strategy, your plays, your targets, your omissions, right? If you don't have that, right, call Todd, right? He'll help you do it. Go to the inbound organization website, download the template. You've got to have that. I was just at a meeting yesterday where somebody showed the MSpot. I wanted to cry because now everybody in the organization knows exactly what's going on. Number 2, right? Use the foundations to establish exactly what Chris did. You got to get the processes, right? You got to translate that mission and MSpot into the processes. And then there's a lot of work, right? To make sure that the processes work, to make sure that you adjust accordingly, that everybody's aligned. That's what they now call RevOps, right? And RevOps is the alignment of all of these different scattered kind of process all into one tech stack and all into one process.
Yeah, that's interesting. Two quick comments. It's chat. Well, first of all, the 30% comment that I made, the reason why I said that is just this week, I ran into 3 competitors that I had never heard of for what I do every day. Obviously, for those of you that don't know, I work for HubSpot. It's on the wall and all that good stuff. But I found 3 new competitors that are really similar. And there's one competitor that their navigation looked exactly like HubSpot. I mean, it's crazy. It came out of nowhere. And so I do think that we have to kind of be on our toes. But I think the ones that nurture and have the right processes set up will win. And prime example on the chat piece, it's amazing to me how many people don't want to get on a phone now with a salesperson, and they want to work through chat. They want to get answers through chat. They want to look at knowledge base articles. They just loathe talking to a salesperson. And so it's wild. Like when I think back 17 years ago, I could set up meetings. I could go have coffee with people. People were like, yeah, we'll meet for coffee. We'll do that. And now it's like, no, I don't want to. And you talking about in person? Like, well, we're going to meet in person. And so I think we have to change the game a bit, and we have to have that nurture piece really kind of on point, or else it's going to be really hard to win.
Super insightful. Todd, we've had people say that. Is a chat really inbound? And what's your philosophy on that, Todd?
Of course it is, right? You need to be available to people the way they want to interact with you, when they want to interact with you. That's inbound, right? It's think about them first and then do that, right? Don't say, well, we like to talk to people from 9 to 5 Eastern time. That's when we like to talk to people. Well, what about people on the West Coast? Or what about people in, if you're international, what do you do with them? And this goes back to the mission and the mindset, right? This is it to me, the thing is, it's an attitude, right? If you get the inbound attitude, right, you make your decisions in an inbound way. And I'm still working on my client that had the chat, and they know there's a huge opportunity there, but they're still trying to move the internal machinery to move resources to do it. They have like 80 salespeople. They literally have 80 salespeople and no one to staff chat. And it's killing me. I'm just like, give me the equivalent of 1/80th of your sales staff, and we could drive so many more leads. Right. And, but it's okay. We're getting there, but it's a mindset change. You got to think that way first, and then you'll do those things.
Well, that's why we wrote the book, right? Change your mindset. And then it's a great answer, right? And there's so much wisdom in what you said. Number 1, the comment, that's the way we've always done it before, right? Doesn't work anymore. I know. Todd, who's the nicest guy in the world and the best co-author in the history of books, is like, okay, it is time to rethink, right? In 2021, after a global pandemic, after what Chris confirms is 30% more competition, right? You have to morph to being a customer-oriented and prospect-oriented process to help more. That's the basis of the whole 6 foundations of the inbound organization. And then you've got to add the technology on top so it's easy for you to meet the requirements or the expectations of your customer.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, I want to ask a little bit about what you're doing in your role. And first, when you start working with new partners or even end users, right? You're working with both. Do people get what you're talking about? We're talking about this mindset and this attitude. Are they kind of in this mode already, or is this a process where they need? Do you think people are kind of coming around to it, or they're nibbling around the edges, or they just don't get it?
No, I think like when I first started, even just 3 years ago at HubSpot, I feel like I had to educate people a little bit more on inbound. And I feel like even, fast forward to today, I feel like a lot of people understand inbound. They've heard it inbound. There's, they understand the methodology. They're cobbling together a bunch of tools. Maybe they have just 2 tools or whatever, but they understand inbound for the most part. But there definitely is still a group of people that think inbound is buying lists and emailing people out, just spamming people. I'm talking to a huge logistics company right now, very large, one of the largest in the US. And that's their strategy, is they just buy lists and they blast out emails and they hope for the best. And they mix some calls in every now and again. People will respond back. They'll call out to those people, but that's their whole strategy. And so there's some education that still has to happen, no doubt. But I think most people get inbound for the most part now. I don't spend as much time educating people on that. I think where people get stuck is they don't have a really like well-defined process ahead of time. I always try to tell people to work on the process before you just go out and buy software. You really need to like hone in on what your process looks like and your target audience and those kind of things.
Hey, Chris, you
Yeah.
can go to inboundorganization.com and you can buy books and you can send them to this logistics customer because it sounds like they need to read them.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I met a guy, a friend of mine here in Nashville. He's done that. He bought the book, and I think you all signed it, or maybe just a few of them, and he sent them to some owners, and he got like 10 meetings out of it, and he's closed 2 of them as clients. And so Ben Stroop is his name. So yeah, I love that. You know Ben?
And we gotta have Ben on the Facebook Live because
he's great.
And he's quoting the book all the time, and he leads with the mindset. He leads with the attitude, right?
Yep.
And of course, that's where it has to start. Executives need to understand that they face a choice, right? You can continue doing what you're going to do, but over the last 4 years, we've said, right, there's a line in the sand, right? And the ability for you to move and embrace the new way of doing business is critically important.
Yeah.
And is being added to the guest list as we speak.
Nice. All right.
He's a great guy. He's one of the first guys I met, first people I met, period, in Nashville. When I moved here to start the agency, I met him in a networking group, and we, just kind of stayed friends ever since. And now he's joined the HubSpot team. Like he's a partner, and he's just a great guy, wealth of knowledge. You should absolutely have him on.
So let's talk about partners for a little bit here. I've worked with lots of partners over the years. So has Dan. And like anything else, there's always a range of skill set and attitude and quality and results. So what in your mind separates a good partner agency from an average one?
That's a good question. Very loaded. I could talk for an hour just on that, but I'm gonna summarize that down some. I think, the partners that what I figured out over the last few years are the partners that have a deep understanding on, certain verticals have done really well. So if they're like really heavy into the med tech space or the, SaaS space, they've really identified that persona that they want to go after, and they kind of hone in on that, and they have a lot of content around that, and they have a lot of business processes lined up around that. Like they've really kind of go all in with 2 or 3 verticals. I've seen those partners be really successful. Also, I think the partners that can get technical, right? So some of our largest partners can get in there and really start to help with pieces aside from just inbound marketing. So they can get in and start to connect HubSpot or different systems together, right? So they can work with APIs and those kind of things. Those partners have been very successful. I happen to work with one of those. It's my largest partner that I work with, and they've had a lot of success. But I think you know, one thing that I want to get across that I think where I see folks come short is they don't take enough time to educate in the beginning when they're onboarding their clients and have like check-ins and making sure that, you know, everything is kind of coming along okay, and that, you know, that the client is happy and they're meeting their goals. They don't do enough of that. And so they kind of just like drift away. And then those clients end up leaving the partner, then they want to leave HubSpot. And so I think that like constant check-in, that constant involvement, education, you know, like this is how we're doing every 30 days or 90 days. The partners that do that and are ultra involved with the client, they seem to be the best ones that I see. And if you don't do that, it kind of feels like they fade away a little bit. Those are some of the things that I see.
Gotcha. So what should people be looking for? How would somebody that's evaluating agencies, say they're a HubSpot user and they want to partner with an agency, what kind of questions could they ask to kind of tease that out, and what should they be looking for when they're evaluating an agency?
Yeah, I think like I actually was just on a call right before this with a large company talking to an agency, and they were asking some of these questions. And I think they were asking some really good ones, like, what does your process look like as day one when we come in? We say we sign with you. What does day one look like? What does, you know, the second week mark look like? What is the 30-day mark? Like, you know, what does that kind of onboarding look like? You know, how are we going to look at goals and accomplishments together? You know, 90 days from now, where are we going to be? Like, and they have a really like that timeline is really tight, and they can get into the weeds a little bit on each of those steps. I see so many proposals that are just cookie cutter. Yeah, we do these 10, 20 things, and it's like they just copied it off of a website. It's not specific, right? There's no like special sauce to it. It's just they're weak, right? And so I think, right, because there are so many partners and because there is so much competition, I think you have to be kind of blown away with the process, and you have to be blown away with kind of the proposal slash, you know, this is how we're going to get started. Yeah, it has to be so different when you have 5,000 partners just in our community, just at HubSpot. There's like 5,000 partners, I think now. It's between 4,500 and 5,000. It's crazy. It's a lot. So I think, you know, you've got to really like lean in on what makes you different. There has to be the special sauce, and people don't talk about their special sauce enough, but there are some that do. And the end users that come back and they rave about that, it's because they highlighted that special sauce.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Again, that's the biggest complaint I hear from agencies that or from clients that have worked with agencies is, and this is one of my complaints of agencies that I've worked with, is that it's kind of formulaic, that they have like, oh, you get this many points and you do this, and here's, you know, it's 7 blog posts a month and 2 emails and this, and it's not necessarily tied to anything specific that the client's looking for. It's just this general, oh, this is our formula, this is kind of the playbook we run for everybody. And I just went through one I did a strategy development project for a client, and they were a relatively small company, very high profit. It was in assembly equipment. They were building medical assembly lines, very large projects, but they didn't have a big team. And the owner was essentially the sales guy, and they didn't really have a lot of marketing help internally. So for me to sit there and say, well, you're going to run this classic inbound strategy, we're going to create 2 blog posts a week and write emails and do ebook, it's like, it's not going to happen. They're not going to do it. Right. So we boiled it down to creating a couple of really high value pieces of content. And then we got them, you know, just working LinkedIn, reaching out to the people they knew. And we had them then do a very strong referral program and recommendation program with their existing contacts and customers, right? Which it was basically just taking conversations they were having and extending them to, hey, help us get into this division or this other place, right? So to me, all that was inbound, but it wasn't a classic inbound strategy. You know, you have to dig into that individual's and the company's specific culture, where they're at, and create a plan specifically for them, because I think the cookie cutter approach is too easy for agencies to try to run, and not tied enough to, I don't think it ends up tying to the results that the clients ultimately want.
Yeah, the results pieces, you nailed it. That's exactly what I was about to add on to, which is like there have been some deals that I've lost with, like we've won them at HubSpot, but my partner has lost, and I've asked the client for feedback, because anytime I lose a deal, and I think every partner, every salesperson should always ask the question, you know, I always want to get better. Do you mind sharing with me why you decided to go in the other direction? And then you take that feedback, and I don't know if it's just, being an athlete all my life or whatever, but I want to be, very coachable so that I can keep getting better. And I want my partners to do the same. And so I asked this question recently, like, just curious, why didn't you go with the couple partners that I had suggested? And they said that the partner that they selected really leaned into the results. They were good at two things. One, the pipeline management and the process that they had on pipeline management. They felt like their revenues would be kind of, tighter and larger, and, they'd have a better view on that. And then second, they said that the analytics, the examples of the analytics that they showed from all of the, inbound and sales efforts and all that, but the actual analytics, like the ROI results, they said the story that they told around that, they felt like they would be able to at the end of the day, know what it could lean into and then pull back from. And the other two partners didn't really talk much about that. They talked about, oh, we're going to come in and we're going to do some blog articles, and, we're going to, help you with some content, and we're going to help you define your persona. And it was the same played out stuff that everybody's been talking about for years and years and years. There wasn't anything different. And I find that interesting.
I just started another engagement with a client where we have 5-year goals, and they have to do with an exit or an equity event. And it's a early stage funded startup, right? So again, we're working backwards from that. So that's the goal, right? To get to a certain value, and you got to build enterprise value to get there. And then you build an inbound plan around that, right? It's not just, to me, it feels like sometimes it's tactics before strategy, where you just say, hey, let's adopt these inbound tactics, and then we'll figure out how we're going to make it work.
Right. I like that.
Interesting. So what do you think are some of the hardest parts for, like this, you mentioned this logistics company, traditional companies, maybe companies that have a pretty embedded culture and way of doing things. What do you think are the barriers? What's stopping them from moving forward? What are the hardest parts about kind of transitioning, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you specifically for them. I mean, I'm going to answer this a couple different ways, but like, let me actually answer it more directly, just in general, and then I'll tell you their specific one. I think that, some industries have, some ideas on how they think it should be, because they talk with their network, and their network says, hey, you should do it this way, and it's old school, and like they can't break away from that old school, certain industries. And I think I see that in logistics, I see it in manufacturing, I see it in oil and gas. There are just certain industries that they're just, I don't want to say hard-headed, because I don't want to sound harsh, but a little bit hard-headed, and they can't see the forest through the trees. And so then there's, you talk about like tech companies and medical device companies, and it's a much different and easier process to get them to come along. But I think with this particular client, they suffer from what a lot of people suffer from, which is they've bought a lot of software in the past. I want everybody to hear this really well, what I'm about to say. If you're a partner, they've bought a lot of software in the past that has just sat on the shelf because they didn't have anybody helping them, put that software to use. And so they have like heavy anxiety about buying yet another piece of software for their company. And so we've had, I don't know, 7 calls with them, and it's a bit long in the tooth. It's probably one of the ones that I, kind of loathe at this point, because we just keep telling them every time, like, this is what they need to be doing. And it's hard-headed. They're a little hard-headed. I think we're right there. We're almost there. But the way that we've overcome in the very end is we've really drilled into that plan of what it's going to look like, that onboarding, that kind of after onboarding, how they're going to measure the results, what others references have been really big. So we've had to plug them in to other logistics companies that have had success with HubSpot, or just, with inbound in general. I think that really helps, is that reference piece. They need that social proof, right? That they're going to be okay and that this is going to work. But that's a really big one that I hear a lot, is like, hey, we've bought a bunch of software and it hasn't done anything for us, and we're scarred for it.
Todd, that's been like that for years. Everybody puts all this time and effort in trying to make the right decision. Buying the software is the easy part, right? Buying the software isn't necessarily a competitive advantage. It's actually implementing it to your processes, right? That's why the inbound organization is so important. You got to define your mission and values first. You got to translate it into the processes, and then the tech has to support those processes in a way that you could do it at scale.
Chris, we've been, you said there's about 5,000 HubSpot partners. My company top line result was, I think, was the 30th. We've been a partner for over 10 years. I met Dan in, I think, 2011. I remember the first partner meeting. It was in a hotel conference room. I've been doing this for a while with HubSpot, and I've worked with numerous people like you the whole time. And do you know how many software demos I've done with my HubSpot CAM or whatever they're called now?
Not many, probably.
0.
Yeah.
None.
I could see that.
I don't sell HubSpot. I don't. It's a tool. It's a tool to reach certain goals or outcomes. And if I sell them on, I know how to get them to those outcomes and those goals. Then they just say, okay, well, how are we going to get there? And I say, well, we're going to use HubSpot. We're going to create content. We're going to do this. Those are the tags.
You're not selling them on that. First of all, you're very selective in who you pick as client. Number two, they know sometimes you'll help them define the goals, but they know what the goal is. So you have a shared goal. So you know how you're going to be measured, what you need to do and what they need to do, right? Companies that don't have specific goals. Chris, you see this all the time. You're like, what do you want? And they're like, we want to grow. And you're like, okay, how much? And they're like, that's a good question. Those people are not necessarily ready, right? And you can take them through the process of defining that, but that's critically important. Once you have tangible goals, then you can take all of the inbound organization information. You read the book, you can get it at inboundorganization.com. You understand the philosophies and your why, right? Then you get a good partner, HubSpot partner, to implement this with you so that you can get into the details so that you can scale better.
Yeah, I think that selective piece that he just said, I could see that about just in the few times that we've talked, Todd, and just knowing, just kind of doing some asking around about you. Obviously, I've read the book, but I feel like I do that as well. Sometimes people come to me and they're like, just like Dan said, they're like, yeah, we want to grow. And I'm like, and I ask them, how much, or have you thought about that? And they're like, yeah, we haven't really thought about that. And I will tell them if they say that about 2 or 3 things that are like that, where they haven't really thought about it, I will take a step back and say, hey, I think what we need to do is we need to work on that first and not talk about software. And I will walk away from that sale, if you will, until they have that defined, because I've just seen it early on. I didn't do that. And I pushed people to buy the software because I'm in sales and that's my job. And then they come back 6 months later and they say, hey, this isn't doing what it's supposed to. And I'm like, I know it's not the software. We didn't take enough time on the front end to really kind of map all this out. And so then they want to get out of the software, and then they want to tell 3 people about how the software didn't do the job. And really it was like they didn't have the goals lined up ahead of time. So I would rather not sell software until all of that is really drilled. So that selective piece, I love that you do that. It took me a little bit to learn that, but I'm right there with you.
It's the hardest thing. It's the hardest. That's chapter 21. That's the Winehouse chapter, right?
Yes.
Tell the story, Todd. Tell a story of chapter 21.
Okay, I'll condense it. But David Winehouse was selling HubSpot at the time. He was a lead came in. He realized they weren't ready, and they basically were begging him to buy the software. He wouldn't sell them the software. He refused because he knew it was going to be a failed attempt. They weren't ready. They didn't have the processes in place, the goals. They didn't have the resources in place. So he said no. And then a couple of years later, they were at Inbound, and they came running up to Dave, and they were like, and he thought, he was like, oh my goodness, who are these people? And they were like, you were so right. We weren't ready. They got ready. And then they ended up using HubSpot, and now they're very, very successful. So
Stormy Andrews got a new book out, by the way.
About personas.
On personas. Yeah.
Wow.
The Winehouse chapter, Professor Winehouse, or David Winehouse, is a 10-year HubSpot employee. That's the hardest thing, first of all, to explain to folks. And we've had to do it, right? Todd and I have sat with senior executives and said, you can't sell to everybody. And they're like, what? Come on, we got to hit our numbers. I'm like, no, your NPS in this particular category. And they're like, we just started measuring NPS. And I'm like, yeah, that's good. Because you know what? When you're dealing with this level of manufacturing, they're too small. So the NPS is like negative, or the NPS is horrible, right? Where you need to focus is your sweet spot, right? This is where people really appreciate your work. So when people call and they're less than $3 million, tell them to go to someplace else. And you can see people's eyes get big. They're like, what? They're like, no. You're not a good, in the old days, it was okay. Today, you're only as good as your brand and where you do your best work. And it's a hard pill to swallow, especially with the old line sales guys. I think it's more around that, like the 50, 60-year-old, like sales, hard charging kind of guys. They're like, no, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And you're like, no, this is the new age of inbound sales.
Yeah, when that quota is staring you down, our quotas are large. They get bigger every year because we keep growing. And so that quota is staring you down and you walk away from that sale. It's tough. It's hard to do.
But
it's the right thing.
The myth is that by hanging on to bad deals and trying to get bad fit customers, you may see a short-term bump, but you'll lose in the long term, right? Because you've wasted time on companies that can't give you lifetime value because they'll leave, right? So you're going to get penalized 6 months from now if they leave, or a year after if they leave, right? So the most efficient thing you can do is not waste time on bad fit customers, right? You can, if you waste time on them, you're not doing them any favors, and it's short-term and selfish on your part as a salesperson to push somebody into something that they're not ready for. So
let's do a whole segment on it. Let's invite Chris back and talk about selling bad fit customers, because we have to get this across. This is hard, right? We understand why it's hard, because it's a complete 180 from what most people have felt. It's aligned with overachievement. More sales equal overachievement. That's not the way it works. Better sales with the right fit equals growth. And both of you guys, eloquent. I've seen both of you do that. I'm a little sheepish here because it's very, very hard for me. I've been faced with this decision in the past, and I've not always taken it.
You think you can sell everybody, right? You
right.
think you can sell everybody. I feel this. I struggle with the same thing. I have to battle it because, and I'm fortunate because my wife sits right next to me, and like if it's a bad fit, she'll be like, "You think you can sell everybody, don't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. I can't say." So. Anyway, Chris, we're gonna have to wrap up here. Time when time goes fast, and I'm looking at the clock, and it's already 45 minutes. I know it's a good episode, so thank you again.
We want him back. Can we get Chris? Will you come back and do it?
I would love to come back, because there's like 4 or 5 things that I wanted to talk about that I can't believe that it's gone that fast.
I know.
So I want to come back.
It's because you're a wealth of information. Both of you guys, right? Very active in the HubSpot partner community. Right. And if anybody has any questions on inbound organization, on inbound sales and marketing, on any of that, right, connect with Todd Hockenberry, connect with Chirs Moore. They're both available on social media. They're both very public personas, right? They're both advocates of the inbound philosophy, right? And like straight up guys, right, who are smart, who are helpful, and that live inbound every day.
Excellent. Well, I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
I just said too kind. I appreciate it.
Chris, thank you very much again for being here. We really appreciate your insights and your time, and good luck to Texas next in the fall. I got a new coach. Hopefully they'll be a little better.
That's right.
And Dan, congratulations on your new role. And
thank you very much.
Thank
Super
you, everybody.
Excited, bringing more inbound to more people. Ooh. Right? We're scaling beyond 100,000 paying customers. And looking forward for the next 10 years.
And one final thing, next month's guest, May 12th, noon Eastern time, is one of Dan and I's all-time favorites, Jill Conrath, who's a really well-known and internationally respected sales expert. And she's really switched things up and changed her approach based on the last year or so. So we are really excited to have her on that on the next event. And we'll be pushing out the information on that, but mark your calendars, May 12th.
May 12th. Let's put it, I'll have Sophie put it in the comments section of this Facebook Live.
Yep.
But Jill is a friend of ours, was one of the early folks in the inbound revolution, was on our podcast. And if I remember correctly, the first female salesperson for Xerox
Yep.
Right. And rose through the ranks. And
we'll have to ask her the story about her, or I asked her once her worst sales experience, and she was at Xerox and she passed out in the middle of a sales demonstration. That's a great story.
Oh,
okay.
I have
All
to
right.
hear that.
Okay. Can you top
I'll
that,
be
Chirs
there.
Moore? Have you ever passed down the sales the salesperson?
I felt like I was going to. Fortunately, I didn't, but I've definitely had some touch and go moments.
Okay, my boss fell asleep once in a sales meeting. Fell asleep. All right, it didn't go over well with the client, and I'm like shooting him under the table. Right, I'm like, you can't fall asleep in a Dan Tire sales meeting. Come on,
Dan. I think that's another episode. Bad sales calls. That's a good one.
Oh my goodness. No. We want. It's not selling; it's helping. The inbound organization is all about a big heart, a good focus. Right. And engaging in the way people want to get. We touched on a lot of good stuff today. That was awesome.
All right. Thanks, Dan. As always, Chris, appreciate it. Next time I'm in Nashville, we're going to go have some bushwhackers.
That's right. Hot chicken.
Hot chicken. You got it. All right. Everybody take care. Thanks for watching.
Take care. Bye-bye.